Welcome to the Homegrown podcast. I'm your host, Liz Hazelmeyer, along with my husband, Joey.
Good afternoon.
And together we hope to educate, inspire, and equip you in your pursuit through nourishment. Today's episode, we're going to be covering our fourth pregnancy, things that are going well, things that we are looking forward to as we plan a unique birth experience, and some of the things that have worked well for us in the past with our kids that we hope to continue on in what they call the fourth trimester or the first 3 months of baby's life. Joey is particularly excited.
Hi.
Literally, before we jumped on, I was like, what are you contributing to this conversation?
Although it's a fair question for most of our conversations.
No, joking aside. I do want to take a little moment briefly to just kind of talk about this pregnancy a little. It's interesting as you are further in your real food journey. So many things are just everyday come naturally to you. So like a lot of what I'm doing in this pregnancy is just a continuation of how I've lived my life for the last several years. And then, but also on the other side of that, as you get into this real food journey and as your eyes are opened up to more things, you no longer are blissfully ignorant. And then you can kind of feel like this pressure to have like the perfect pregnancy. Like I want to have the most nourished pregnancy. I want to have the most beautiful, blissful birth experience. And all those things are really good to long for. But when you kind of get caught up in that, it can be a bummer if you all of a sudden are like, oh, I have really low energy. That first trimester, I did not hit my protein goals like I wanted to, or something goes sideways in your birth experience and you have to pivot. You always want to leave room for grace in that. So starting the conversation off by saying this is not like a how to have the best pregnancy. This is just sharing our experience and what has worked well for this fourth babe so far. Important to the conversation, I'm currently almost 30 weeks pregnant. So we have gone through the first and second trimester. Praise the Lord. Those are over. And the third trimester is rolling right along. So where should we start?
Well, we could potentially, just so that folks kind of know where we've been, go over some of the initial births that we've had in the past.
Yeah, that's a great
to give
idea.
a perspective of what we're utilizing as a kind of, control point for us as we begin discussing what we're hoping to do and what we've been doing.
Yeah, so I have had a plethora of birthing experiences. I have birthed in a hospital with an epidural. And basically at that point with my first child, I was about a week late. The plan was for induction. They were going to do like a 2-step induction. The first step being Cervidil, which is like this little medication they place within your cervix to soften things up. And then the second step being Pitocin to really get your contractions going. Luckily, I didn't need the Pitocin. So I was just had the first phase of induction, but I ended up getting an epidural around 7 centimeters and had a baby the same way that so many people do in the hospital setting with pain medication. And honestly, it was a great experience. Then with our second born, she had a breech presentation, which means that she was feet down instead of head down. And we knew that for the couple weeks leading up to her birth. I did some things to try to flip her and change her positioning. And some things I regret doing. I regret trying to do the version of they administered an epidural and the doctor manually tried to flip her. And if you recall, that was a very stressful situation. They had a Doppler on me and an ultrasound kind of wand, just checking baby every step of that way to make sure baby was okay. And I was just like, is this really worth it? Because it felt too risky for me. In hindsight, I wouldn't do that again. But the goal there was if we could get baby flipped, let's go ahead and induce her and she can birth vaginally again. Great. But then the flip side of that was if she's breech, you're going to have a C-section. Now there are practitioners in our city who would have delivered a breech baby vaginally, but I just didn't know them at the time. And so that's the decision we made. So anyways, we did the version. I had a C-section. It was a non-emergent C-section. I think we were in the OR for
12 minutes.
12 minutes, yeah, before baby was born. Again, a beautiful experience in its own way. That is the birth of one of my daughters. It's not something that I completely have negative feelings around, but there's definitely things that are just different. It's a very passive experience. You aren't as engaged as you would hope. I think you watched some of it, which I'm still amazed. I don't even know how you can watch a surgery like that take place. But baby was placed on me right away, and there were some good pieces of it. I had a wonderful anesthesiologist who was super helpful, and the hospital staff were great. Third baby, I was merely focused on having a successful VBAC, which is vaginal birth after cesarean, because I didn't want to repeat C-section. I knew the C-section wasn't due to anything, quote, like wrong with the birth experience. I knew like it wasn't like pelvis tilt or sizing or anything. It was just how baby was presenting. And I also knew that it's hard to successfully have a VBAC in a hospital setting where they're very prone to repeat C-sections. So keep in mind, we were due in April of 2020 with our third baby that I was hoping and planning to have a successful VBAC with. And as the sort of world caught on fire, hospitals were saying that you could no longer have a support person, you couldn't have a doula, maybe your husband can be in there, you'll definitely labor and deliver with a mask on. If you test positive for COVID, we'll separate you from your baby. We don't know the protocol of when we can reunite you. We'll have to keep baby separate in the nursery. Also, all these fears swirling around in my head. And I said, I don't want to do that. So at 34 weeks pregnant, I talked to the woman who was planning to be my doula, who is actually a certified home birth midwife. That's what she does. It's her bread and butter. And I said, hey, this is kind of crazy, but can we transition your role to just have a home birth? Do you remember me coming to you and asking that?
I remember you bringing it to my attention, and I didn't think about it at all.
It's
I was
like
just
the
like,
raw milk all over
it
again.
was like, hey, you came to me like all like
Stress.
serious and meant business, and you said, I'm thinking about changing our delivery to a home birth. And I was like, all right. And you were like in this house. And I was like, oh, okay. And you were like in our room. Like it was almost like you like were like looking for me, to like freak out. And I just either I was not stressed about it at all and just wasn't worried about it, or couldn't worry about it at the time of where I was. But I think it was more like the raw milk, where it was just like, hey, listen, this is your decision and I'm here for you. I just didn't even stress or think about it at all.
Interesting. Yeah, I felt so nervous about it. I think the main reason I was hesitant was because I was going for a VBAC, and there's just a little bit of precaution there. You look out for things like uterine rupture and things like that because you have had a C-section prior. So I think had I not had the C-section, I would have been like, oh, totally, let's do it. But I just had that little bit of a hang up. But after talking to the midwife and establishing parallel care with another OB in town, it was like I was sprinting to the finish line. I had to take a really quick birthing course for at home, like physiological birth. I had to like gather our birth supplies, and we did it. 34 weeks, we switched. Ray, who was due in April, like late April, was actually born early May. So we had a wonderful home birth, and it was awesome. So then we looked at those kind of 3 births, and I'm like, my favorite experience of the actual birthing process was definitely the home birth for a number of reasons. One, I just loved being home. I loved that after I delivered her, we were just like in our room eating soup that your mom had dropped off at the front door. We turned on Everybody Loves Raymond, and it was like, the midwife is there still cleaning up and her assistant, but like, it's just peaceful. There's no people coming in and out of your room. There's no beeping sounds. There's no Joey gets food poisoning in the hospital like he did for our second born. There's a lot there. And I think one of my misconceptions early on about home birth was like, well, you're sacrificing medical care. And I would say, actually, you're sacrificing some pharmaceutical pain management. That's absolutely true. Like, you don't have the chance to get an epidural. But you're not sacrificing medical care in terms of you or your child. Your baby's heart rate is monitored through the entire labor process. My midwife administered 2 rounds of Pitocin to me after birth just to clamp down and kind of stop bleeding. So it's not this anti-pharmaceutical, anti-medicine framework.
Mm-hmm.
It's just taking the birthing element and putting you in a home environment. And trust me, the arsenal that you have to prepare ahead of time in your birth kit, I mean, you need like 20 towels and bowls and a fishnet and like a birthing pool, and you need syringe, like you need so many things. You really bring everything that's necessary for a safe mom and baby home. And then the second that things might present a challenge that is no longer breachable at home, or a problem can't be worked out at home, you transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't carry this like, I will have this baby in the home. You peacefully transfer to your closest hospital, or the hospital that you've already established care at. And then you continue on with your labor. And so I think just understanding that piece of like, well, I knew we were about 12 minutes away from a hospital. I knew that with my particular midwife, she had not experienced emergent transfers. They were always transfers where, hey, things aren't progressing like you want them to. I can see you're getting tired.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to transfer to a hospital? And it's mom looking at her saying, yes, I think I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not this scary, like, I can't stop bleeding, blah, blah, blah. I know that stuff happens, but talk to your midwife and ask them their experiences. Because if you get a really conservative midwife who will catch the scenario before that unfolds, takes away some of that fear, some of that like scariness. So yeah, you can absolutely bring sort of like a medicalized experience into your home where it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's not appropriate is like the doctor coming in telling you need to push because you're 10 centimeters, like you're not feeling the urge, like all of these things that women face on a regular basis. So anyways, long story short, experience 3 different types of birth. I think all birth is beautiful. I don't think everyone has to have a home birth, but for us, this 4th baby, that's the goal. So yeah.
So going home birth and father perspective, because I know you asked for it, is also super relevant, right? Because people care about what the dad thinks.
They do. A lot of dads have a lot of opinions about home birth.
Do they?
Yes. It's a scary thing.
Interesting. Scary, huh?
Yeah.
All right, well, here's my opinions. It is from a wanting what's best for your family perspective. There's some security in being at the hospital for sure. And I can totally see where you're going to be able to, when something goes wrong, then lean into someone else for help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something goes sideways at the hospital, you lean into the doctors. What's going on, doc? Right? What do you do? Like, what's going on? Like, what are we doing for her if something were to go wrong, right? So you do. So as a dad or dad to be, you feel like, oh no, it's going to be me that's being leaned on. Mm. And so I think, the way you can, at least the way I've alleviated that possibility of feeling that is having my plans in place of what we're going to do, where we're going, all mapped out, knowing the time it'll take, etc. Right? I know that if something goes sideways, one, I've got someone there that I can lean into to make a decision that's appropriate. If ever Melanie believes that it's time to go, she's going to tell us that.
Yeah.
And then immediately I know what to do. And there's no like wondering, or it's getting you into the vehicle safely and driving 12 minutes to the hospital. Mm-hmm. And to me, I'm like, okay, so at max, we're looking at like probably 20 to 25 minutes to getting you into someone else I can then lean on. And to me, that feels like an appropriate level of time for me to be capable of handling the pressure.
You can bridge that gap.
I'm like, can I handle 25 minutes? Like, yeah, I can handle 25 minutes. Mm-hmm. So anyways, that's how I've made that decision. So if you're out there and you're really stressed or anxious about it, thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm the dad. And what am I, like, now I'm going to feel that strain or pressure of like, what, make the decision. It's not as bad as it seems for me, at least. The post-birth, as anyone can imagine, is exponentially better as a home birth experience goes to a, C-section.
Yeah.
C-section is very stress-free, I will admit. You roll in there and it's just like done.
Yeah,
Baby's born.
there was no laboring, there was no waiting.
There's no like coaching. You just kind of sit there and then like less than 10 minutes. I mean, it's very quick. The only reason we were in there for 12 minutes, if that, was because of getting stitched up. So, I mean, the baby's out like in less than 5 minutes, I think. I mean, it's crazy.
It's wild.
Anyhow, post-birth for a home birth, you're in your home. And so from like an experience point of view, the having a baby experience is elevated like to an extreme place because you're so comfortable.
Yeah.
Especially once things are kind of cleared, and they often are. I mean, it's very rare based on the understanding that our midwife has given us after thousands of these. It's not like she's done 10, right? Thousands of these home births, that it's extremely rare that there's any issues, but that she's dealt with them and that she tells us how she dealt with them and what happened. And you're in your house and you have everything you need. You're now able to rest in a way that you never can in a hospital. And again, I've experienced both. Hospital, once post-birth, it's not restful. No. It is not at all. If anything, you're kind of on edge the whole time. And once a benefit of like the quote unquote potential stress leaning onto doctors. Now you're like, you feel like you're pushing against doctors because it's like they're coming in and now it's like they're choosing what they want to do all day. Right. And home birth, it's not that way. It's because you put in that little bit of, on the front end to take on that pressure of not having a doctor there to take on the stress for you. Well, now post-birth, you don't have any of that weird, like, authority gap happening. It's all yours. You get to make all the calls. There's a lot of comfort there. I really enjoyed that. For this baby, what would you say are some of the things that over the last 3 kids you've learned during pregnancy that you're doing differently now?
I would say,
aside from just the birthing process, of course.
Right. I would say I started my parenting journey very young, so I knew nothing. And then with our middles, clubbed foot situation, that really spurred on our let's look at things. And then Ray was actually a very nourished pregnancy. I had already read Lily Nichols' book. I was already eating a pretty whole foods, real foods diet. But I'd say the final pieces of this pregnancy that have made the biggest difference are, one, my fitness journey really accelerated in the last 2 years. I think because I was consistent strength training for the last 2 years. And then I also did that extra 75 hard last fall where I was eating very high protein. I think what that did was allowed me to either put on a little more or at least maintain really healthy, lean muscle. And so for this pregnancy, I felt like my energy's been pretty good. I just finished off my 28-week kind of glucose testing. And instead of taking the glucose drink and then measuring my blood sugar, what I did was just monitor my blood sugar for 3 days post-meal and fasting glucose levels. And honestly, my numbers were even better than the 8 weeks that I had measured the first time I learned about blood sugar. And I was talking to my midwife about that, and she's like, gosh, your numbers are just so good. I mean, your fasting is in the low 70s, maybe 80s, which is fantastic. And then 1 hour post meal, you're nowhere near 129. She wanted to see us below 129 after a meal and, somewhere below 90 as a fasting glucose. And I was just so far below both those numbers. And she's like, what do you think it is? I said, I think it's my muscle mass. I think, one, I eat a pretty healthy diet, but girl, you can see on my log of food that I have a bowl of cereal in the evening and it still doesn't spike. Even presented with a glucose rich meal, my blood sugar was being regulated. So I think the muscle mass on the front end has been really helpful for this pregnancy and understanding how my body works in that. I think understanding hydration a little bit better this pregnancy has been helpful. I will say the greatest kind of tool in my toolkit has been really mineral rich beverages. So I've been loving like my coconut water, lemon juice, salt. I call it like nature's Gatorade. But even in the first trimester, just adding extra minerals to my water, taking those mineral supplements from Ancestral Supplements, adding in things that I know are generally lacking, but then being even more diligent as I'm pregnant because I know my resources are being taxed. And then continuing from what I did with Ray, I found a prenatal vitamin that had methylated folate and choline, taking the same prenatal I did with Ray. And there's lots of good brands that have both of those things. So it's not like there's one that owns the monopoly on it. But finding a good prenatal and then kind of supplementing here and there with other things. I've been trying the salmon roe from Natural Heart Doctor after our conversation with him. My friends at Ancestral Supplements shipped us a huge box of amazing stuff because Craig knew I was pregnant really early on. And so taking some of those like beef organs and liver, and you've been taking that stuff too and loving it. So just leaning into what I already know is so important, which is attacking it from a nutrient density like lens, like making sure kind of I'm fully nourished, and then also keeping up movement with this pregnancy. I don't think I was very active with Ray's pregnancy. I can't really remember, to be honest. But definitely walking every day, strength training 2-3 times a week in the second and third trimester. In the first trimester, I was just surviving. And then beyond that, if I was going to go even more granular, ideally 2 eggs a day, because I'm already getting some choline from my prenatal. And so getting that extra 2 to 3 eggs a day is wonderful. You made me eggs this morning, so thanks for that. And then obviously hitting a protein goal. I think before I would have been like, protein is so hard. And then forcing myself to eat a lot of protein for a long time. I really have gotten better at getting in protein. This pregnancy has been interesting because it's less meat protein and more protein from dairy. I've just been loving it. Yogurt, drinking raw milk, having raw milk yogurt, but also our high protein skyr yogurt, making smoothies, having protein shakes. Like that's really been my biggest vehicle for protein. And I think it's interesting that that's what I've kind of been craving. I haven't been so much into the meat. Even if we fry up like an amazing steak, I'm like, I don't know. It's been weird. So yeah, those are kind of, the basics of.
What are some things you're excited about once our baby is born to do to help condition our child in a way that will best set them up for success?
Condition our child. I am excited to, one, I have goals for this birth. Very practical. I told my midwife, number 1, I would like to understand the phase of each labor as I'm in it. With Ray, it was home birth, my first unmedicated birth. I didn't really know where I was in the journey. I think that was the most frustrating part for me, is not really understanding like, no, you're in transition. Like you're like an hour away from pushing. So if you can just get it through this part, you'll be fine. So having the, which is wonderful because you can do that in any setting. You can have a goal of, okay, I want to tune into my body and know which stage of the process I'm in. You can do that in hospital, birthing center, home, wherever, it doesn't matter. So that's a goal for birth. I also, for this birth, would really love it if it didn't start by my water breaking spontaneously. That wasn't followed up with contractions, because that's what happened with Ray. My water broke. My midwife was like, you're not contracting, just try to go to bed. And it was like 8 hours before anything actually happened. And so I didn't like how long of a process that was. And that kind of put me in this, like, I can't do anything to distract myself because I'm like leaking everywhere. It wasn't ideal. So for this baby, I'd love for the birthing experience to go faster and to start differently, and for me to be in tune to what's happening. And same thing for after. I think afterwards, I'd love to be able to say, yeah, I'm going to rest in the room for 5 days, really take my time. But if I want to see my kids, like I'll see my kids. I don't necessarily feel the need to like ship them off like I did with Ray. Or I'm really counting on you to make me amazing food like you did with Ray. I remember this Asian salad you whipped up out of nowhere. You remember that?
No.
With the red peppers and the dressing? Oh, it was so good. You made it like 4 times.
I can do it though. I think. I'm sure. Was it gingery or what?
Gingery.
Soy, ginger
So
scenario?
I don't remember any soy. It was like a ginger lime dressing, and it was just like something you whipped up. I mean, she was a summer baby, so it made sense. But yeah, I'm looking forward to equipping this child with whatever he or she needs. And what I mean by that is the birthing world is wonderful because your midwife, if you're having issues breastfeeding, can recommend a lactation consultant. And that lactation consultant can recommend someone who does body work. And then you can recommend a holistic dentist who can look into lip and tongue tie revision if that's what you need. And so I think taking early steps, taking early action with Ray really set her up to be a wonderful, delightful baby. And so I want to repeat that too. I want to have a posture of like, hey, let's not rush into decisions, but let's know that we have options. Like if I want to have a chiropractor come to the house and adjust the baby, I will. If I feel like I need an expert opinion on, maybe a latching issue, I will go get that. I will utilize these friends and
not rushing into it, but also not just like procrastinating forever while we're dealing with an issue and a challenge. And you notice, we're having these kinds of challenges. We have some ideas. We're going to move on real quickly because we've identified also you can go 6 months waiting to get a tongue tie revised, and then you're going to feel some frustration for 6 months. Same thing goes for like, should we go to the chiropractor? It's like, just go, just do it. And it's helped us a lot. So I dig that. What about like food, feeding, talk about breastfeeding? Like, what do you have any like plans there? Any like goals to hit?
My goal is always to exclusively breastfeed till at least 6 months. I have never had a really successful journey in that. I usually tapers off closer to like 4 or 5 months, but in my previous kids, I was working full time. Ray was the first baby I wasn't working full time. I think I breastfed her till 6 months, and then she started eating, and so then she like was less interested. And then around 8 or 9 months, we kind of switched over to all raw milk and food, and that's how she thrived.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
I don't even think did Ray ever. She went from like a bottle for like 2 months to a cup.
Yeah, she was barely even bottle.
She had really good dexterity. She was able to pick up cups.
Yeah, she was doing a cup at like probably 10, 11
like
months.
Not even a sippy cup, right? We didn't even do a sippy cup.
Just a little silicone cup.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do a sippy. I'd get rid of that.
Yeah.
I loved that experience with Ray. For me, I know it's like the least crunchy thing I do probably is like I don't do like the full 2 year of nursing. I don't enjoy it that much. And I also have always struggled with supply. I wonder if that'll be different this time. Who knows? But I did all the things with Ray and still kind of struggled with my supply. So the second that I was like, she's pretty solid. She was at least 6 months old. I was like, okay, I feel good about that. So, total amazing accomplishment for those who can breastfeed.
What about like first food introduction? I think we did egg yolks and stuff last time.
Yeah, I'll probably repeat the same thing.
Same thing.
We did smashed egg yolk and butter, kind of rolled it up into like little balls. She like picked it up on her own. We did avocado, we did banana, kept it really simple. And then from there, and maybe a little grated frozen liver. And then from there, or I made like a liver pate actually. From there, continuing on as they're out, we don't start food until 6 months old, or they're showing signs of readiness. They're sitting up on their own. They're reaching for food. They seem like they're interested. And so I look for those signs. It typically pops up around 6 months of age. And our kids from the very beginning start eating 3 meals a day, small meals, but they start eating at 3 different points during the day, supplementing, of course, with either breast milk or homemade formula. And that has worked really well. So yeah, I'm planning to do the same thing.
I dig it.
I'm actually planning to train for a half marathon. And so I'm giving myself 6 months to focus. I told you this earlier. I said 6 months of focus on baby and get baby super squared away, healthy sleep patterns, healthy establishment of like breastfeeding and like just make sure they're thriving before I even think about beginning a training protocol.
So then post-pregnancy, I guess you jumped ahead there, but post-pregnancy, the thought is, man, at the 6-point mark, you would like to re-enter a pretty rigorous physical health journey.
I would like to train. Yeah. I think one, it'd be really fun to run a half marathon after having 4 kids, because running has always been the thing that I'm like, I'm really bad at it, is what I tell myself. I just don't have as, good of a resting heart rate.
No one is good at running.
I know.
Some people do it long
Very
enough to do it more than others.
So it's kind of my own little thing that would be so opposite of what I think I could ever achieve, that I was like, you know what, I want to do it. And I think that would be really fun. I'm not going to attempt a full marathon. I'll do a half, and then we'll go from there.
I love it. Anything else here?
In terms of baby?
Mm-hmm.
Pregnancy?
Mm-hmm. Where could people look for resources about this sort of thing if they're entering into or about to start their journey in pregnancy? Where should you go looking?
Yeah, favorite books and resources. I will say, number 1, my favorite book to read is called Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. The first half of the book tells birthing stories, both from their own practice in a home birth setting, but also plenty of hospital birth settings, even gentle C-section birth stories. So there's lots there. And then the second half of the book is detailing physiological birth, which is just going with your body's natural progression, not being influenced by pharmaceuticals, pain management, things like that. That book opened my eyes to what birth could be, and it was amazing. So that book is number 1. Number 2, Lily Nichols' Real Food for Pregnancy. Lily's been on the show before, so if you haven't listened to her show, you can go listen to that. But wonderful resource. Her Instagram is also a wonderful place for knowledge. She writes blogs and research posts, and she just is always staying up to date with what's going on in the world. The Nourishing Traditions Child and Baby Care book is really good to just have on hand, so you can flip through those early days where you're like, this weird rash is coming up. What is that? You want to look at it? Or, I think I want to try this like salve thing, and how do I make that? It's got recipes. It's got information on normal childhood illness. It's got information on feeding baby, first foods. It's such a good, compact resource. And then from there, after those 3 books, because I think those are great, there's some other like breastfeeding books I think are good, but I would encourage all moms to, 1, listen to encouraging birth stories. That is really helpful. I find those on YouTube. I listen to my friend Lisa's from Farmhouse on Boone. I listen to just amazing birth stories, because something that's been really helpful is just visualizing what I think this birth will be. Really, from the day I found out I was pregnant, I do it every day. I do it while I'm like trying to fall asleep at night. Like, what is going on? What are the different things that could play out, and how can I see this birth happening? And then it helps me prepare. It's like when you visualize yourself giving a presentation in front of a big group, and then you go give that presentation, you're like, I feel like I've done this before.
Mm-hmm.
Doing the same thing with birth. So those are my kind of resources. I'm sure there's more, but I keep it really simple.
I dig it. Friends, if you have any further questions about this, you can reach out to us or to Elizabeth, who will have most of the answers. If you had specific dad questions, I would happily answer them. But I know that most of this are probably going to be directed towards you. Therefore, you can find Elizabeth at Liz Hazelmeyer or at homegrown_education on Instagram. You could also find me at Joey Hazelmeyer on Instagram if you would like to, or if that was interesting for you. We have an additional resource where we share more information and more stories. I'm sure we'll have some birthing stories to share on this platform, but it's a Substack channel. So we have a Substack channel that we have that's go to substack.com and then type in the search function homegrown_education, I assume. Mm-hmm. And you'll find our Substack channel. You can subscribe to that. It is a paid channel, so you can pay to subscribe to that and hear all sorts of content that we create for that channel specifically. We also have educational resources, one of which is brand new that's coming out probably
definitely after the release of this show.
After the release of this show. Thank you.
Real Food Framework will definitely be out at that point. So grab a physical copy or download it on PDF.
homegrown.education.org is where you can find that on our website. You can also find our online retail goods store at shopth.com, where we sell soap for your kitchen, for your shower, for your hand soap, wherever you need soap.
For your body in the shower, not for your shower tile.
I mean, I guess in theory, you can suds up a brush and get after it. But yeah, we've got that for you, shopth.com. We got the best coffee on the planet there as well. I'm in the mood for coffee right now. It's like 5:00.
I just had the lavender Earl Grey tea. Maybe that was a bad decision at 4 p.m., but I woke up from a nap and I knew we had to record. And I was like, I could really go for something light and floral, but a little sweet. I put sugar and milk in my tea, obviously, as every proper tea drinker should. And the lavender Earl Grey, it just hit, it's just, it's so
in addition to
good.
Amazing coffee, as you can tell, we also have amazing tea. All on that store, shopth.com. You can find it and get yourself some of that. There's all kinds of stuff on there too. We've got a ceramic line. We've got sourdough goods and tools. The
list is too long.
Lots of stuff coming there as well. Definitely go check it out. You can also find curriculum for your kids and books in addition to the Real Food Framework at homegrawneducation.org. And friends, until next time, that's a wrap.